I noticed a pattern almost by accident. The way Daniel started staying late every single Friday for what he called client wrap-up meetings at his firm. At first, I didn't think twice about it, because his job had always demanded long hours, and Fridays were apparently when his team finalized reports before the weekend. But after the fourth or fifth week of this routine, something about how he rehearsed his explanations began to bother me. The same phrases repeated almost word for word each time he walked through the door past 9. I never said anything, just filed the feeling away quietly, the way you do when you're not ready to confront something you're afraid might be true. It was a credit card statement that finally cracked the calm I had been forcing myself to maintain. I was paying bills online one evening when I noticed a charge from a hotel downtown, dated a Friday from 3 weeks earlier, the same night Daniel told me he'd worked until almost midnight finishing a presentation. I stared at it for a long time, telling myself there had to be a logical reason. Maybe a client meeting that ran late and required a conference room, but hotels don't usually bill for conference rooms at 11 at night. I didn't confront him immediately. Instead, I started watching more carefully, checking statements going back months, and what I found made my hands shake. There were 8 charges in total, spread across 8 consecutive Fridays, all from the same hotel, all roughly the same amount, all time-stamped late in the evening. I sat at our kitchen table with my laptop open, calculating dates against memories, against the nights he'd kissed my forehead and apologized for missing dinner again, against the mornings he complained about how exhausting work had become. 8 months of lies laid out in neat little rows on a bank statement, and I realized I'd been thanking him for providing while he was funding an entirely separate life one Friday at a time. I didn't cry that night. I just closed the laptop and sat in the dark kitchen for a long time, thinking. The next morning, I called the hotel directly, claiming I needed to confirm a reservation detail for my husband's expense report. The front desk clerk, without much hesitation, confirmed recurring reservation under Daniel's name, always for 2 people, always checking out before checkout time the next morning. I asked, almost robotically, if there was a name associated with the second guest, and the clerk mentioned a name I recognized instantly, Melissa, a co-worker Daniel had introduced me to at his company's holiday party 2 years earlier, someone I had made small talk with over wine and canapes without the slightest suspicion. The betrayal suddenly had a face, a name, a history I'd unknowingly already shaken hands with. I didn't confront Daniel that day either. Instead, I spent the next week quietly preparing, because I understood that the moment I said something out loud, the element of surprise would be gone, and with it, any leverage I had. I contacted a forensic accountant a friend had once recommended for a completely unrelated reason, and within days she helped me trace exactly how much of our joint savings, retirement contributions, and even a portion of my own inheritance from my late father had been quietly redirected to cover expenses I never approved. Daniel had been using money from accounts I had trusted him to manage fairly, to fund a relationship he'd hidden from me for 8 months. When I finally sat him down on a Sunday afternoon, I didn't raise my voice or throw accusations across the room like television dramas suggest betrayed spouses always do. I simply slid the printed statements across the table, each hotel charge highlighted, each date circled, and watched his face shift from confusion to panic to something close to defeat. He tried explaining it as a mistake, as something that wasn't supposed to mean anything, the same tired language people use when they've been caught rather than when they're genuinely remorseful. I let him talk for almost 20 minutes before telling him calmly that our joint account had already been frozen the day before, and that I had retained a lawyer who specialized in financial misconduct within marriages. His shock was almost satisfying to witness, not because I wanted revenge for his own sake, but because for 8 months he had assumed I was too trusting, too busy, too comfortable to ever notice what was happening right under my nose. I told him a divorce filing would include documentation of every transaction tied to those hotel stays, framed not as simple infidelity, but as financial misconduct involving shared marital assets, which legally complicated his position far more than a typical affair would have. He hadn't expected me to fight back with paperwork instead of tears, and I think that unsettled him more than anything I could have screamed at him in anger. The following weeks were a blur of legal meetings, mediator sessions, and careful negotiations over assets he had assumed were safely shared between us. Melissa, Predictably, distanced herself the moment things became messy and public within their workplace, leaving Daniel to face the consequences entirely alone. Something he clearly hadn't planned for when he started this elaborate routine of dishonesty. Friends who had once admired what they called our stable, easy marriage were shocked when they learned the truth. Several of them admitting they had noticed small inconsistencies too, but assumed it wasn't their place to say anything. I didn't blame them. Betrayal hides well behind routine, especially when the person doing the hiding has had years of practice appearing trustworthy. In the settlement, I walked away with significantly more than half, not out of vengeance, but because the financial misconduct made the math impossible to argue against a mediation. Daniel lost not just a marriage, but the comfortable financial cushion he had built carelessly assuming I would never look closely enough to notice the cracks beneath it. I moved into a new place near my sister's family. Started spending Fridays the way I wanted to, dinners with friends, quiet evenings reading, simple things I had quietly given up somewhere along the way without realizing it. Looking back now, what strikes me most isn't betrayal itself, painful as it was, but how calmly I was able to dismantle the comfortable assumptions Daniel had built a secret around. He believed routine would protect him, that predictability would disguise deceit indefinitely. But predictability is exactly what gave him away in the end. I learned that trust, once broken through calculated dishonesty, isn't rebuilt through apologies or excuses. It's rebuilt through actions. And his actions over 8 months had already written the only answer I needed long before I ever found that first hotel charge.